The lights on set were bright as usual, but something felt cold. That morning Keanu Reeves stepped out of his trailer with a warm smile on his face, the same smile he always carried even on tough days, the kind of smile that made people feel calm. In a world full of chaos, greeted the camera crew, the grips, the assistant director, everyone responded with respect, not just because he was famous, but because of how he treated them like equals, like people who mattered. But as he walked toward the center of the set, something didn't feel right. Tana de Armas wasn't there. Her trailer door was shut, no signs of life around it. Keanu looked at the second assistant and asked gently, "Hey, have you seen Anna this morning?" The assistant hesitated, glanced around, then leaned in. "She's not coming back." Keanu blinked, trying to make sense of the words. "What do you mean not coming back?" The assistant shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "He replaced her last night. Someone from the studio called, said she's out. They already flew and someone new." Keanu stood silent, his mind racing. He knew Anna had been excited about this project. They had rehearsed scenes together late into the night, shared notes, laughed over dinner after long shooting days, and talked about how this movie could show another side of her talent. Had seen how hard she worked, how much she gave of herself, how she showed up even when she was exhausted, and now she was just gone. Without warning, without goodbye, Keanu walked over to the director, who was adjusting the camera angle. Was Anna replaced? He escaped. Director didn't look up, just said studio to CC, and Keanu's voice was calm but firm. Was she even told? A prompt. Director sighed. "They sent an email late last night. It was out of our hands." Keanu stepped back slowly. "That's not how you treat people." Didn't say it loud, but the words carried weight, and without saying another word, he walked off. Seth's footsteps were quiet, but they echoed like thunder. Everyone paused. The grips, the lighting crew, the makeup artist, even the new actress who had just arrived. They all turned to look as Keanu disappeared behind the studio doors. Inside his trailer, Keanu sat still, staring at the wall. Memories of the past few weeks rushed through his mind. The long conversations with Anna, the way she lit up when she talked about finally being taken seriously, the quiet moments she shared when she said this film meant more to her than anything. Before he picked up his phone and texted, Harry heard, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." Minutes passed, then his phone buzzed. "Thank you, Keanu. I wasn't even told properly, just an email from my agent last night. They said the role wasn't working. They said I wasn't right." Could feel the heartbreak in those words. She replied, "You were more than right. You gave your soul to this." Anna didn't answer right away, but when she did, it was only 3 words that really hurt. Keanu stared at the screen. He thought about how many people get used up and tossed aside in this industry, how talent wasn't always enough, how kindness was often ignored. Knew he had to do something. Opened his door, walked straight to the production office, and asked for the producer. "She's on a call. They say you'll wait." Keanu replied. 15 minutes later, she came out, surprised to see him. "Everything okay?" Keanu Noah looked her in the eyes. "You didn't just replace an actress, you hurt a human being. And not just any human being, someone who showed up every day with heart and honesty." Producer looked uncomfortably. Studio felt she didn't fit the new direction. Keanu's voice stayed steady. "Then maybe the direction is wrong." Raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying I'm saying I won't be part of this if that's how we treat people?" Her mouth opened in shock. "You're walking away?" He nodded. "I am." There was no anger in his tone, just truth. Keanu walked back to his trailer, packed a small bag, and left the set. No press release, no dramatic statement, just silence. New news had already started leaking online. Rumors flew fast. KeanuReeves leaves, project creative difference, script dispute. None of them got it right. No one said what really happened. At that, he walked away because of someone else, because someone was hurt in a way that didn't make headlines but left a mark deep in. Sadina was sitting alone in her apartment when she got a call. It was Keanu. "Can I come over?" He sketched, paused. Then Sadie's. When he arrived, she opened the door, and for a moment neither said anything. Then she scared. "Did you leave?" He looked at her and said, "Because it wasn't worth it without you." Anna sat down, her eyes filling with tears. "No one's ever done that for me before." Keanu sat beside her. "Maybe that's the problem." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "He thought I failed you, didn't he?" "Didn't see. Yeah, but I did." Outside, the city kept moving, the industry kept spinning, but inside that quiet apartment, something rare had happened. Isn't it a rescue and not a romance, but something deep, respectful, human, respected in that moment. To people who had been pushed around by script studios and headlines, finally found something honest, not in the spotlight, but in the silence. Asterisk. The headlines didn't tell the truth. They never really. They said things like Keanu Reeves exits upcoming thriller, or production delays due to creative disagreement. But no one mentioned Anano. One mentioned the quiet decision made behind closed doors to cut her out without explanation. No one said a word about how she was replaced overnight by someone with more followers, someone the studio believed would sell better. But what the headlines didn't know was that Something deeper had begun far away from the flashing lights. Anna sat on her couch staring at her phone. The messages kept coming in from friends from her team, from strangers online, who noticed she had vanished from the cast list. Some offered support, others asked questions, but she didn't have answers. Kept going back to one thing: Keanu said he didn't see you, but I did. Those words stayed with her because she had always felt invisible in this world that judged by numbers, by beauty, by buzz. But Keanu had seen past all. They saw her soul, and when the world tried to erase her, he stepped away from the camera just to stand by her. The next morning, Anna's agent called, "You're trending," she said. Anna rubbed her eyes. Why? Keanu walked off the film. "And now people are asking why your name is everywhere." Rena Paul said he didn't ask for this, the agent said, "but people are listening now. Maybe you should say something." Anna opened her laptop and stared at the screen. She thought about writing a tweet, something short and vague, but that didn't feel right, so instead she wrote a letter, not to defend herself, but to tell the truth. When she was done, she posted it quietly. No tags, no drama, just her words. She wrote, "I wasn't told in person. I wasn't warned. I wasn't even thanked. It was just gone a bit. What hurts more is that this happens every day to people who don't have millions of eyes watching. War, not lines in a script. We are not just faces on a poster. We are human." Thank you to the person who reminded me of that when I forgot. Post went viral within hours, because of anger, bit because of truth. Keanu saw the post while sipping coffee in a quiet bookstore. He had gone there to avoid the noise, to avoid the questions, but there it was spreading across every screen. He smiled softly, not because he was proud of himself, but because she had found her voice again. A few days later, Anna got another call, this time from a small independent director named Marcus. "Sadie, read your letter. I've been building a story for someone exactly like you, not a star. Soul, would you consider reading the script?" Hannah hesitated. She hadn't stepped on a set since the replacement. Her heart was still bruised a bit. Something about his voice reminded her of Keanu, calm, honest, no shades in it. Over that night, she read the entire script in one sitting, and Creed was raw, real, about a woman rebuilding her identity after being erased. Said when she finished, she texted Keanu, "You think I found something?" Keanu replied almost instantly, "Maybe it found you." Anna called Marcus the next day, and she said there was no studio backing, yet no guarantee of success, no fancy trailers, just a story worth telling. Anna began preparing for the role, not to prove anything, not for revenge, but to reclaim something. Trained with a voice coach, took dance lessons for one scene, read old journals to connect deeper with the character's pain. Meanwhile, Keanu kept out of the spotlight, turned down 3 new offers. People were confused. Is he stepping back? Is he okay? He was more than okay. He was finally living by his values. Then one morning, Anna got a surprise. Showed up to a small rehearsal room, expecting just the director, but found Keanu sitting quietly with a printed copy of the script. "Blink, what are you doing?" her Esmeletti asked Marcus if there was a role for me. To laugh at you. Want to be in this little film? Keanu nodded. "You want to support stories like this, and I want to support you." Anna sat down beside him. "Think y'all?" Looked at Harry. "You don't need to thank me. You were the story all along." We read scenes together all afternoon, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. Connection between them wasn't about fame or gossip. It was built on something deeper: respect, trust, presence. His production for the new film began. Word started to spread that Keanu Reeves and Ana de Armas were working together again, this time on a film with no big budget, no studio marketing, no expectations. But people were curious about the movie, bit about the reason. Would the big names do something so small? Would they walk away from fame just to tell a quiet story? The answer wasn't in a headline, it was in the way Anna walked on a set every morning, now confident, open, no longer questioning her worth, and in the way Keanu stood beside her, not in front, not above, but beside her. They didn't come to be starsty, came to be homestand. Honesty always finds its way. It was the first day of shooting for the new film, the one no one had expected, the one no one had planned. And set wasn't glamorous. It was a tiny old building in a quiet neighborhood with peeling paint on the walls and secondhand furniture inside, but there was something real about its meeting. Period. Arrived early that morning, with no makeup, no assistant, no noise, just herself. Stood quietly outside the door, taking in the air, remembering how long it had been since she felt excited about a role. Not nervous, not anxious, just excited. Keanu arrived minutes later carrying the coffees. He handed her one without a word, and they both smiled. Inside, the crew was setting up lights. Marcus, the director, was pacing around with a camera in hand, his shirt slightly wrinkled and his eyes wide with ideas. Anna looked around and said softly, "This feels different." Keanu nodded. "Because no one here is pretending." Anna exhaled slowly. "That's what I needed." They rehearsed the first scene sitting on the worn out couch in the middle of the room. It was a scene about a woman telling her truth For the first time in years, no special effects, no shouting, no music, just words. And when the camera rolled, there was silence so heavy you could feel it press against her. While Santa spoke her lines slowly, her voice shaking just a little, not because she forgot them, but because they felt so close to her own. Keanu listened, as his character should patient, quiet, letting her speak without interruption. When the scene ended, no one said cut for several seconds. Marcus had tears in his eyes. That's it. He whispered. The crew nodded in quiet agreement. They knew they had captured something. Rowana looked at Keanu and he gave her a small nod of approval, the kind that didn't need words. Filming continued like that for days. Every scene felt more like a confession that a performance. A story was about a woman being replaced in every part of her life, not just in work, but in love and friendship, in memory, and finding her way back to herself. Keanu's role wasn't the savior. He wasn't there to fix her. He was just there to see her and stay in. Sometimes that's the hardest role of Alice. Filming progressed. Word started to spread in the indie film community. A journalist named Nora reached out for an interview. Anna hesitated, but something inside her said now was the time. They met in a quiet cafe with no cameras, just a notebook and a recorder. Nora Skedwe, did you choose this film? Anna looked down at her. Coffee, then said, because for the first time I wasn't asked to be beautiful. I was asked to be real. Nora Skedwe changed after the other film. Anna smiled slightly, stopped trying to be someone worth keeping and started being someone worth knowing. Interview was published online under the headline "The Armas finds her truth in silence." His story went viral again, but this time for the right reasons, not gossip, not drama, just honesty. Meanwhile, the original studio that replaced Anna was struggling. Their new lead didn't connect with audiences. The trailers felt hollow. Something was missing. A few blogs even started pointing it out. Maybe it wasn't about who sells. Maybe it was about who stays. By the time Anna and Keanu's small film wrapped up, it had already gathered attention from a few major film festivals. Team submitted it quietly, with no marketing, no paid buzz, just a flash drive and a hope. Weeks later, they got the call. They had been accepted into one of the biggest festivals in Europe. Ina cried when she heard the news. She wasn't embarrassed. She didn't hide it because those tears were proof she still felt and hadn't gone numb to the world's harshness. Keanu called her later that night. You did this? Replied, no, we did this. Said you were the soul. I just walked beside you as the festival approached. Anna felt a mixture of fear and excitement. She didn't know how people would react to the film. Would they see her? Would they see the girl who was once replaced? Keanu reminded her, if they see you and still look away, it says more about them than you. On the day of the premiere, the theater was filled with critics, actors, directors. Strangers. Sana wore a simple dress, nothing loud. Keanu wore the same black suit he always did, nothing flashy. The film began, and the room grew silent. Every scene, every pause, every glance between them was felt deeply. Some people wept, others sat frozen, and when the credits rolled, no one moved. Then slowly, one by one, they stood. Applause began. It, while not chaotic but respectful. Anna looked over at Keanu. He was already standing beside her, not clapping, not bowing, just smiling with calm eyes. After the screening, a woman from the audience came up to Anna. Thank you, she said, for what Anna skipped for telling my story without knowing it. Anna's hands trembled as she said, thank you for seeing it. Next day, the reviews came in, and they weren't about glamour or style. They spoke of Truthoff, quiet power of a woman who once vanished, being seen again in all. Through it, Keanu stayed close, but quiet, never taking the spotlight, always passing it back to her. When asked in an interview why he joined the project, he simply said because she was worth it. And in those few words, he reminded the world that kindness is not weakness, that loyalty is strength, and that sometimes walking away from something big is the only way to make something honest. Asterisk, the festival buzz didn't fade. Days passed, but people kept talking about the film, not because it had special effects or famous sponsors, but because it touched something real. Film critics, who usually wrote sharp, cold reviews, called the story brave, raw, unforgettable. Reviews simply said, didn't watch a movie, we watched a healing. The Armas wasn't used to this kind of attention. This was different from red carpet flashes or gossip columns. This was respect. Real respect. Sat alone in her hotel room after the premiere, reading the reviews, not because she wanted praise, but because she wanted to believe what was happening was real. For so long she had been told who to be, how to smile, when to speak, but no people were listening to her story. Without asking her to change, her phone buzzed with another message. This one from an old director who had once told her she wasn't strong enough to carry a lead. Rolla Rote saw the film. You were the heartbeat. I was wrong. Anna stared at the screen for a while, then closed her phone gently. Didn't need to reply. Silence was enigmatic. The hallway. Keanu was sitting on a balcony looking over the city lights. didn't attend the after party, didn't go to the press lounge, just sat in the quiet. Because that's where he felt most honest. A knock came at his door. It was Anash. Stepped in with a soft smile and Sadie, still don't believe this is happening. Keanu replied, that's what truth feels like. At first hard to accept. Sat beside him. He was so close to giving up. Before this I thought maybe I wasn't meant to keep going. Keanu looked at her and said, and nose paused, no, I feel like I've come back to life and not dead in it. Because of them, not because of me, but because you chose not to disappear. They sat there in silence for a few minutes, letting the moment belly. Next morning they were invited to speak at a panel discussion. It was meant to be about storytelling in modern cinema, but something shifted. When they took the stage, people leaned forward, not to hear famous names, but to understand what made this story different. Tana spoke first. He was replaced without warning, and for a long time, I thought maybe I deserved it. When still he wondered what I lacked. I questioned my worth. I blamed myself, but it wasn't about talent, it was about value, and how this industry sometimes forgets that people aren't disposables. Turned to Keanu briefly, then back to the crowd, but someone reminded me that walking away from the wrong thing can lead you to the right one. People applauded, but quietly. They weren't clapping for family, we're clapping for homestyle. Then Keanu spoke. I've been in this business a long time, and I've seen a lot of faces come and go, but rarely do you see someone stand still in the storm and stay true to who they did that. And I knew that if I stayed silent while she was erased, then I wasn't the person I thought. Awash's voice didn't rise. I stayed calm. Instead of sometimes walking out is the loudest way to stand up. After the panel, people lined up, not for photos, not for autographs, but to simply say thank you. Thank you for making us feel seen. Thank you for telling the truth. Thank you for not giving up. Later that evening, they walked through the city streets under soft lights with no cameras following. Ghana said, it's strange, the film is about being forgotten, but I've never felt more remembered. Keanu looked ahead, because you showed up as yourself, and that's what people really need. They stopped at a small coffee shop, the kind that didn't care about family. They sat near the window, watching the world go beyond. Sadie wondered what would have happened if you hadn't walked away. Keanu smiled. Tana tilted her head. You never doubted it, not? Ansi shook his head. No, because I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking towards something better, and now here we are. Arethi sat quietly for a moment, sipping coffee, watching strangers laugh out. City. A little girl walked by holding her father's hand. She looked at Anna through the glass and smiled. Anna smiled back. The little girl didn't know who she was, but in that moment, she saw her as an actress, not as a name, but as a person, and that's all Anna ever wanted, to be seen as she really was, not for a relented, for a headline, but for her. Hard as the film gained more attention, offers started pouring immigrant roles, interviews, features. But this time, Anna chose carefully. Not every script was worth her voice, not every spotlight deserved her light. And Keanu stayed beside her, not as a mentor, not as a savior, but as a friend, a true one who told her choose only what lets you breathe fully. And she did, because now she knew how it felt to lose everything and still find herself in doing so. She became more than what the industry ever allowed her. The best became whole. The world was watching. Know what started as a quiet project had grown into a movement. Not loud, not angry, but firm in truth. Anna de Armas was no longer just an actress trying to prove herself. She had become a symbol of quiet resiliency. Right beside her was Keanu Reeves, not leading, not guiding, just standing beside her. Step for step, word for word. The film was invited to another major festival, this time in North America, but something felt different this time. They weren't the underdogs anymore. They were being celebrated. As they arrived at the red carpet, people called out their names. Photographers leaned forward, fans clapped. But Anna wasn't walking in just to be seen, was walking in so others could be seen through her. The film played again to a full house, and when the credits rolled, something unexpected happened. A young woman from the audience stood up with tears in her eyes and said loudly, was replaced at work too, without reason, without warning. And for months I thought it was my fault, but this film reminded me that it wasn't me who failed, it was them who never saw me. People began to applaud. Others stood and began to share. On by one, stories came out of the shadows. A mother who was laid off after pregnancy, a student who was silenced by her professor, an artist told to change everything about herself just to fit in that theater. A community was born. Anna stood there silently, hand over her heart. Keanu gently took her hand and squeezed it once, not for show, but for truth. After the screening, a panel was held, not just for filmmakers, but for audience voices to be heard. Anna sat on stage and said the film was never about me alone. It was about all of you who were made to feel small and still chose to stand up again. Keanu added, every time you speak your story, you make it harder for the world to ignore what's real. Later that evening, as the stars began to fade from the sky, and the noise settled into quiet. Once again, Anna and Keanu sat outside on a bench, facing the water in the St. Sometimes I still remember the moment they replaced me. That sudden cold silence, no explanation, no warning. Keanu nodded. Some wounds don't vanish, but they do. Teach looked up at the sky, wonder what would have happened if I stayed silent. If I didn't write that letter, you would have still been powerful, Keanu said. Because the truth inside you doesn't need a microphone, it only needs spacing to look at Hyman. You. What made you walk away from everything you had? In that moment, Keanu was quiet for a long time. Then he said, because peace is worth more than any paycheck, and I promised myself long ago that I'd never let silence be used to hide injustice again. She leaned back against the bench. She used to think strength looked like shouting, breaking through walls, but now I see strength can also be stillness, choosing not to fight back the same way, but to rise in a better way. Keanu smiled sometimes. Walking out is the beginning of walking home. Ease the weeks past. Their small film received a surprise nomination for an international award. No one expected it, not even them. It wasn't about the trophy, it was about the message. Gina was invited to speak at a university where young artists and actors had gathered. Stood in front of a crowded room filled with hope and fear, and said, you will be told to change, you will be told to smile when you feel broken. You will be told to stay quiet, to not cause waves, but I am here because I caused a wave, and instead of drowning, I learned to float. You don't need to fight to be seen. You need to stop hiding your real self. The room erupted in quiet applause. After the talk, a girl came up and said, you've never felt brave enough to tell my story, but maybe now I will. Anna looked at her and said, your story is waiting for you to give it a voice. Don't keep it waiting. Along back in the city, Keanu and Anna met. Marcus, the director, again held a script in his hands and said he wanted to tell another story, but only if you both say yes. Again, he flipped through the pages slowly. This time, the story was about kindness in the face of cruelty, about staying human when the world demands something colder. Anna looked at Keanu. We ready to do it again? Keanu didn't hesitate. If it speaks truth, then yes. Three of them stood there in a small cafe, surrounded by laughter and clinking cups, not realizing they were starting something once again. Not a movie, a mirror, a reflection of everything people feel. But rarely. Sienna had been erased once, but now she was writing stories that couldn't be erased. Dan Keanu, the man who walked away, was helping others walk toward themselves. Asterisk. The second film began in the same quiet way the first one had. No billboards, no celebrity press, no fake promises, just a small team with honest hearts. Anna de Armas stood in front of the camera again, not as someone seeking validation, but as someone grounded in her own worth. KeanuReeves watched from behind the camera in this new project. His role was small on screen, but powerful behind the scene. Didn't need the spotlight. He had already found something greater than Faber Post's story. They told this time was even simpler than the last. It was about a school teacher who helped her students find their voice. Dramatic scenes, no explosions, just moments of quiet. Braviana played the teacher. Her eyes carried weight, the kind that only comes from living through something real. And the audience felt it at the first private screening. There were no loud reactions, just soft breathing and tears, kind that come from being reminded you are not alone. For the screening, Anna walked outside alone, needing a moment away from the lights. Stood under a tree enclosed her eyes. A girl from the crew walked over slowly and said, me mother was a teacher. She gave everything, and no one ever saw her the way you showed her in this film. Anna opened her eyes then. This film was worth everything. As word spread, the second film began to receive invitations from schools, charities, and even small communities, not for awards, but for conversations. People didn't want to interview Anna anymore. They wanted to invite her to speak, to listen, to help others feel seen. No night during a quiet dinner, Anna turned to Keanu and said, do you ever miss the old days, the big premieres, the red carpets? Keanu stirred his tea slowly. Sometimes I miss the people who truly cared, but not the noisiness. Milady used to think if I wasn't seen on every magazine cover, I didn't matter. Now I think if I could help just one person feel seen, then I matter more than ever. Keanu raised his cup. Those stories that don't need selling, just telling. Anna clinked her glass with histo. People who choose kindness even when no one's watching. In the months that followed, they continued their quiet work. They helped fund young filmmakers. They created a small program to support actors who had been pushed aside. They showed up at schools not as celebrities, but as people who knew what it felt like to be harassed. Dan chose to rewrite the stories. First film was picked up by an international streaming platform, but Keanu and Anna added a note at the beginning. This film is dedicated to the ones who were replaced, the ones who were told they weren't enough. You were always enough. And viewers felt it. Messages flooded in from mothers, from daughters, from silent dreamers, saying the same thing. Thank you. I who saw me on day. Anna received a message from A girl in a small village who had watched the film on her phone late at night as Sadie used to hide. Who I was now, I want to show the world. Dana read the message and Creech forwarded it to Keanu. With only one sentence, who did it? Keanu replied, no she. Did we just help her remembering that was always the point, not to let it to remind us time passed? The noise of other films and headlines came and went, but their stories lived on quietly. Like a soft flame that never went out, Tana continued to act, but only in roles that honored truth. Keanu continued to listen more than he spoken. Together, they remain examples of what the world could be: place where kindness doesn't get replaced, where silence carries meaning, and where people are not erased when they stop fitting the mold. In the end, the industry tried to forget her once, but she became unforgettable, not because she fought back with fire, but because she stood up with grace. And Keanu Reeves, the man who walked away from a studio that didn't see her, became the one who helped the world see her completely. And maybe that's what real success looked like, not standing on a stage, but standing by someone who needs unit for applause, but for presence, walking beside them until they remember they were never small, just waiting to be seen.